Hey everybody, it's Greg Rice and we're here at Delana Law in East Greenwich, Rhode Island, and we're with Melissa Delana.
Hello.
How you doing?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm doing really well. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good.
And the great thing for the folks at home is Melissa and I know each other, but we've never got to sit down and have
That's true.
a long format conversation. So this is going to be
Right.
as organic as possible.
It's our first date.
Our first camera date.
It's true.
So my first question is, how did you get involved with the practice?
So, really, I'm in practice with my father. Carmen Delana has been around for a long time. I started practicing in 2004, which was his 30th anniversary of being an attorney, which was kind of fun. And since I've really been a little kid, Greg, he's always pushed me towards becoming a lawyer and being my own business person. You know, really just kind of following in his footsteps, which I did not want to do, right? I mean, no kid follows what their parents suggest that they do when they're in high school or college, because we've got to go it on our own. So I did. I was an accounting major and started working in accounting, and I realized pretty quick that I didn't want to work for somebody else.
How come?
Primarily because my very first day of my internship when I was in college, my boss was laid off. So I showed up to work, reported for duty, and I'm at my job, and my boss showed up in her bathing suit and said, "Hey, I've been here 25 years and I'm leaving today. I've been laid off." There was a very, very big corporate merger, and I was really taken aback by that.
And where was that? Was that in Rhode Island?
It was in Massachusetts.
Okay.
And I think my major objection to going to law school was that I didn't want to spend more time. I wanted to start working. I wanted to make money. I wanted to be my own independent person. And all of the grown-ups, right, that I was working with in that accounting corporate firm just basically said, "You've got a lot of years to work.
Right.
You're not going to have this opportunity again. Take the 3 years and go to law school. You won't regret it." And they were so right. Anybody who is contemplating law school, I can't say enough good things about it, because frankly, it opens a lot of doors, whether you want to teach. A lot of folks are in the FBI, if you want to go into politics, history majors, or, you know, still a lot of scholars and a lot of opportunities. And frankly now, a college degree is really not what it used to be.
Yeah,
you
sure.
need a next level. So I really, really love it.
So you're saying that for the folks at home maybe thinking like, I'm not going to trade 3 years of my life,
Right.
when I can make $60,000 a year, now I can have 180 instead of being 180 in debt. But you're saying like just you got 40 years of work, just sacrifice 3.
Yeah, I mean, and there are financial components that need to be considered. I was in a place where financially I had the flexibility. I had a partner who was able to support me, so I didn't have to worry about work.
True.
And trying to pull my weight. I didn't have children, although there were plenty of colleagues that I went to law school with that actually did have children, or it was a second career for them. And, you know, unfortunately in Rhode Island, the financial path that's associated for a young lawyer is not super high. So I can remember coming out saying I would make more if I had stayed in accounting at this point in my life and my career.
Right.
But again, I do think that if you have an interest in opening your own practice, or, you know, really working hard and hustling to make more, I think you're always going to be able to make more.
And what about nowadays, the way that law is practiced versus when your dad started?
Oh my gosh.
Does he
so
tell
different.
you, like, what are some of the biggest differences? What year did he start?
74. Yeah. Yep.
So what does he tell you from like the 70s, 80s compared to now?
Well, I mean, it's just so vastly different. And his practice has truly evolved in the time that he's been practicing. He started as a general practitioner. He worked for, you know, several other lawyers during the course of his career before he went on his own here. Then in the late 90s, or early 90s rather, he really became more involved in what was going on in the banking world. He worked exclusively as a bank attorney for, back then it was Fleet Bank. You know, all the documents, all the packages were handled with an overnight delivery, or typing those documents in blank form. I mean, there was no email. You know, when I came on in 2000, you know, as a really intern in law school, you know, it was like there was one computer that had the email, you know, I mean, and it wasn't what it is. Wasn't what it is now, right? I mean, even in 2004 to where we are now in 2020, or early 2000s to 2020, we've made so many strides in the way that information is shared and protected, right? Because that's really one of the main goals of our firm, is to make sure that if information is exchanged over the internet or through email, that it's done in a way that is going to be secure with the amount of fraud and, hackers that you see out there.
I've talked to Matt Bates last week.
Okay.
And then I also interviewed Dan Balkin of
Yep.
Balkin Title, and same question. Will the home buying process ever become 100% digital? And they both said quasi, like there's gonna be some wet signatures and the rest could be digital.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
I think that eventually it will ultimately become digital, but I think that it's a lot of years off. Okay. So I think during our lifetime, there's probably going to be some quasi, but I do think it will go digital at some point. It's just how much. There's already digital signatures versus wet signatures. And there were, pre-COVID, 28 states that were authorized to have electronic versions of closings, and remote signatures and remote notarizations.
And drive-by appraisals too?
Drive-by appraisals. Some banks are actually waiving appraisals. So there's even more that we're
Fire
seeing.
Safety too, they waive?
Yeah, a lot more that's happening, I think, electronically and digitally. Some of it is a function of necessity, right? Obviously, with everything COVID, we've kind of had to reinvent ourselves a little bit. And Rhode Island did allow for remote notarization, but on a temporary measure. We do expect that it will become permanent, but it's going to require legislative change. That's a slow process. Right. The banks have not allowed for the remote notarization to happen in Rhode Island. Some jurisdictions, like I said, about 28 states were already doing it. Rhode Island wasn't one of them. So I think eventually we will get there and the banks will evolve to allow us to do it. Really then, once we have remote notarization on a universal platform throughout all the states, I don't know if we're going to need to have in-person closings. I think that's sad. Evolving to that place is not something that makes me happy, not only from a self-preservation perspective, but also really because you lose some of that formality of it. Even now, Greg, during COVID, we're doing what I call a bifurcated closing. Buyers will sign separate from sellers. And even that feels really anticlimactic because you don't have the congregation of the parties, the culmination of the efforts, the realtors there, everybody sort of watching. And, it's just now, like I said, it's anticlimactic.
The nostalgia is gone.
Yeah.
Where it's chopped up.
And I don't know that it's necessarily because it's the way we've always done it. I don't. I think it's really because people want that. They want to have the formal exchange of the keys and the ceremonial, signing of the documents. The agents want to be there to kind of not necessarily cheer on their clients, but be able to help
support them.
Right, support that this is such a major achievement. So
What are you going to do?
I was asked a lot at the beginning of COVID if I thought that we were going to have a permanent change in the way that closings were conducted and they'd always be bifurcated. And at the time I said, no, definitely not. This is a temporary measure. But as it continues on over time, I can't help but wonder if it may become more common practice. Again, doesn't make me happy. I still think it's sad. But I think that when buyers are able to come to the closing and maybe the lender's there and maybe the realtors are there and I'm there as the attorney and we're all at the table, I think you're starting to feel a little bit more of that achievement. But I do think that the sellers signing with their counsel in advance may start to become commonplace. Because I think people like it. They prefer the convenience of being able to sign a few days in advance and just knowing that it's done and it doesn't impact their work, it doesn't impact their move. So I think that there are some conveniences that are being recognized throughout COVID that make people want to continue doing it this way, potentially. So it'll be interesting to see.
Switching gears a little bit, right? You work here with your dad. Is there any other family that works in the office?
So I do have an accountant who is our full-time accountant in the office here. So he maintains, our corporate books, reconciles our IOLTA accounts and, does all of that, cuts all the checks. But aside from that, no.
So just you three?
Yep.
Is that hard? I can only imagine. I love my mom, I love my dad, but I don't want to work with you guys. It's tough enough, like working in a stressful atmosphere like this with family and then going home and then is that tough or has that become not even an issue that you're so, it's so routine?
It's been a long time. I've been in practice now for almost 16 years. So I think that we've kind of worked through when there were any difficulties, what that looks like. I can tell you that there are, certainly benefits and disadvantages to any type of relationship.
Right.
Fortunately, first and foremost, I don't live with my parents. There
Which
is
is huge.
There is a way to get away from it, right? I can't say that was always the case. There have been occasions, even when I've worked here, that I lived with them.
Yep.
But at this point, I would say the benefits far outweigh the cons in that that somebody that always is going to have your back is your business partner and is there for you. But, at the same token, I really have tried to separate how much my dad is involved in the practice as a function of COVID so that he's not conducting closings and being at higher risk for exposure and things of that nature. He still comes in, but I'm not having him conduct as many closings as he would like. So, we're certainly trying to manage that. Yep. But I would say, again, the good part about being in a family practice far exceeds any disadvantages of it. And at the end of the day, although we do see clients that have very strained family relationships, and this would certainly lend itself to that, I think we've always just taken the approach that we want to persevere. We have a very close-knit family dynamic, so we're never going to let the family side of things suffer as a result of what's going on in a business practice.
Right. That's very mature.
No, thanks.
That's
it's important, honestly, for anybody that's contemplating a family relationship.
Do you think that it's better to work as a solo attorney, which I know a couple, they have a part-time secretary, or is it better to be a part of a team? Well,
I can tell you that as a control freak and type A personality, I would love to be able to control every aspect of my practice, from answering the phones and opening the files to dispersing the checks at the end, conducting the closing in the middle. That's one of the advantages of being a solo practitioner, is that you get to maintain that control with maybe a little bit of help. But for the volume that we manage in our practice, it is just not practical, possible, or logistically feasible to manage. So we have a large staff. I tell all of my staff I value what they do as much as I value what I do, and if I could clone myself to do it all, I certainly would. So, whether it's opening the file or dispersing the checks or some of the spots in the middle, I can't say that one person's job is less or more important than the other. We genuinely are all working towards achieving the same goal, which is to have a streamlined closing for the clients, making sure that the realtors, the agents, the lenders, everybody is getting that active communication that you need in order to get the transaction over the end line.
So question, how do you keep the morale positive in a place where people are constantly badgering you and complaining and this, all the stuff, you're like an adult babysitter almost for all these things going on. How do you keep your people happy and motivated?
It can be a challenge. There's a lot of alcohol involved. I think there's a lot of kind of us versus them when we're feeling that way. Like, well, I don't know why this one's not getting us that information, or I don't know why this person thinks that we would keep it a secret that, we don't have this information. So I think it's sort of a camaraderie that we generate. And I think that happens from being in the trenches. Again, not to hop on COVID, but I do think with having as much of my staff, because about half of my staff is out of the office and half is in, that has definitely created a little bit of a strain. And there's times where I can feel, so, we may end up having like a powwow. We haven't really done a lot of the FaceTime or Zoom, group buildings, but it's more just, the one-on-ones with me where I'll contact the individual staff member and we'll just try to have a conversation about what's going on in your life, what's working, what's not from this remote, do you need to come in? So it is difficult to, kind of build morale on an ongoing basis, but it's a lot easier to do in person.
For sure.
Having the lunches, having the, kind of bitch sessions, if you will.
Joking.
Yes. Yeah, that definitely helps. So.
How about switching gears a little more serious, something that you think should change industry-wide? Maybe it's legislation, maybe it's a lender thing. What's something that you look at every time and you're like, oh, why are we even doing this?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think that my answer would not be super popular, but I'll give it to you anyway. When TRID came out, which is the Truth in Lending regulatory change that came out a long time ago, not a long time ago, 2015. It required that we had the closing disclosure, which is the final accounting, shared with the buyers at least 3 days in advance of the closing. And what we as an industry of closing attorneys thought was going to happen is that we thought that the closing disclosure was going to be generated, a clear to close was going to be generated at the lender end, and then we'd have 3 days to finish everything.
Yep.
That's not how it goes. The truth in lending regulation loopholes have allowed for the closing disclosures to be shared with the clients during the underwriting phase, such that when we get the clear to close, there's still occasions where we're getting the clear to close and the closing same day, which can make for kind of a bumpy transaction if that means that the bank hasn't forwarded us the closing package yet. Maybe the buyers don't have their final figures yet as far as how much their bank proceeds check needs to be or their certified funds via a wire. And that's when some of that last minute communication can really start to create some disruption in the confidence that I think the homeowner is about to have is why is it an hour before my closing and I still don't have my final numbers? And that for me always feels like don't kill the messenger.
Right.
I'm at the end of the transaction. I can only feed you the information as I get it. And I never want to make it seem like it's the lender's fault because, you mentioned Matt Bates. Right. The loan officers are doing a good job. They're right. The processors are working hard. The underwriters, the closing department, everybody is working their tails off to get this done. But when we have something happening very real time, that's when I think it always feels a little bit more bumpy.
How can that be fixed?
Well, I don't know, aside from the closing disclosure going out after or at the time that the loan is cleared to close. But then the problem that you have there, Greg, because we do have some lenders that adhere to that, is that now you need to build in 48 hours or 24 hours or 72 hours or whatever the policy is before you can have a closing. And that doesn't mean the closing department is necessarily working on it because they still have those 24, 48, or 72 hours respectively to get us what we need. And that's the struggle that we see. I had a closing just this morning where the loan has been cleared since September 10th. Today is not September 10th, it's 6 days later, and we still didn't get the documents until 20 minutes after the closing was scheduled to take place.
What documents?
The closing package.
Wow.
So the buyer was here, and I joked with her that we were going to watch a YouTube video and learn how to juggle together because there's only so much filler work and paperwork that I have until that document comes over from the bank. I can't finish executing. And of course I was reaching out to the loan officer and the lender, kind of closing department to say, where are we with this? Do I need to postpone the closing? And again, it's difficult to reach people by phone because of COVID. Emails, only get answered sometimes intermittently. So the client did show up and she and I had spoken this morning. So she knew that it was coming in hot, as I like to say. It was going to be a little bit bumpy. And she came and she said, I haven't seen any numbers. I said, don't feel bad, me neither. And we'll have them hopefully any minute. And again, it was only 15 minutes or so after she arrived. We were able to get it done in a timely fashion. But was it stressful for her? Probably. I mean, it's stressful for me, and I do this all day, every day. So when I try to put myself in the shoes of a borrower, someone who's never been through this before, that's where I think I feel they would be frustrated. And new buyers, first-time home buyers really don't know any different, right? They've never bought before. But where I hear the frustrations are people who have bought and sold in the past. And they'll say to me, this happened more at the beginning in 2015 when we had the regulatory change. This was supposed to make things easier. Instead, all that happens is that we see multiple versions of the same numbers and you never know when it's final.
Yes.
And I think that that's really where, as an industry, we're doing the best that we can, but we sort of miss the mark on making that process easy for the prospective buyer. So that's something that I would love to see changed. How do you go about changing it? Frankly, I don't know. I'm not going to be the one who spearheads the change because I feel like as you make those changes and you uncover other problems. So I think it's just a constant evolution.
Good answer.
Well, thanks. Unfortunately, not one that is an easy answer.
But it sheds some light.
Yeah.
How about how many offices or how many people in Rhode Island are qualified to conduct a closing? I don't know that I know the answer. We did have a recent Supreme Court case that discusses conducting a closing itself is not the practice of law, but if you are asking a legal question during the course of a closing, then
Anybody who's not a lawyer has to stop the closing and get a lawyer. Obviously, I am an attorney, and I spent a lot of years, as we talked about earlier, becoming licensed, becoming experienced, being able to, I think, handle it in what will hopefully be a flawless way.
Right.
Because especially when you are in a position where you're conducting both the buyers and sellers in the same place at the same time, you will have to field more questions.
Yep.
You will have to negotiate more parts of the transaction than perhaps you were otherwise prepared to do as a non-attorney. So I do think having an attorney conduct a closing does have some advantages there. The number of people who are able to conduct a closing, I don't know, but there are. God, I don't know.
1,600, like.
I guess I would say I know all the players, and I would say it's probably 500 or less.
Okay.
There are other attorneys who maybe dabble in real estate.
Yep.
But I would say as far as primary real estate practitioners, closing and title attorneys, or title companies, I would say we're probably at 500 or less. It's a pretty small bar, I think. I don't know though, I've never counted.
Interesting.
Someone's gonna have to fact check this.
I was talking to Marty Slepko.
Yeah.
And he told me, he said, Greg, I've closed over 50,000
I believe it. Transactions.
Yeah. And he said, granted, some are refinances.
Right.
Which are easier, but that's incredible.
Yeah. I can say that our volume is probably parallel to their volume, although they do have more practitioners in their office, so they may even exceed our capacity. Last year, we closed probably close to just 1,000 units in the year. So maybe more. I'd have to go back and revisit the numbers.
Yeah.
But I know it was dangerously close to that number. So if you think about, if I have closed 1,000 units in my practice of 16 years, that's 16,000. I mean, Marty's been around for a long time,
right,
as has my father. So if you were to look at how many he's closed in those, 46 years of practice, it's probably,
neck and neck.
right, that's what I said. We're probably parallel, maybe a little bit less, because my father was not always a real estate practitioner, and obviously as the market shifts, right, 2007, 2008, we were probably not closing 1,000 units,
right,
but we were working in short sale transactions. So we were also handling a large number of, real estate transactions in the short sale world. So it really just kind of depends year over year. We're blessed to have a strong volume, and I think it's in part because we've had a very long-standing relationship with lenders and agents in the state of Rhode Island. We, like I said, work our tail off to communicate and make sure that people are having streamlined transactions when we can.
And I've done maybe 10 closings for my properties, and I don't think you get paid enough.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for saying
look
that.
at the fee, and it's like $1,500, $2,000, $2,500.
That's very that's a very good fee. Conservatively, it's probably closer to 1,000 a closing, to be honest.
And it's like the amount of just the point ones. Every question that you get is your time. Those can add up. I'm sure you have files that ask you this many questions.
Yes. Well, and not to mention the files that have problems, when there's title issues or, difficulties in communication, whether the sellers or the buyers are in state, out of state. There's so many layers.
So many knickknacks.
Yep, that can complicate whether or not the fee is worth it. And there's times, just like in anybody's business, I'm sure, Greg, where you feel like you just stole the money, right? You're like, that was so easy. I feel like I overcharged them. And then there's other occasions where I'm thinking, geez, if I made 50 cents an hour, it's a lot, So hopefully it all averages out. I do think that as an industry, real estate attorneys are underpaid, especially for the amount of risk that we take on. But again, you have to be competitive. I know that our fees are extremely competitive with the market. So, we're not going to start price gouging anybody by any stretch.
Right.
But comparative to the other parties involved in a transaction, the real estate attorneys are paid the least. I think.
You can spend $1,000 on a home inspector. You can spend $1,000 on an appraisal.
Right.
You can spend $1,000 on title insurance, maybe.
Right. Well, the title insurance is a different component than the attorney piece, but right.
It's like, and what do you get for that?
The title insurance?
No, I'm saying these $1,000.
Oh,
you get
right.
a quick, tangible thing. See you later.
I know.
And it's just, to me, it's always felt like this profession is abused and underpaid.
Well, thank you.
And there's no agenda.
You're very
here.
brave. Yeah, those are things I would never say out loud.
but it's true.
True.
Like, that's just my feeling about it.
Yeah.
So, next question I have, and then we'll will refresh is
Okay.
your most memorable moment, maybe at a closing or just in the business that will always stick out, positive or negative or indifferent.
I can tell you probably what it was I was conducting a closing. I was the buyer's attorney, and the seller was attending the closing with their client. The seller's attorney was attending with their client and their realtor, and I was having a conversation with the other attorney, and he wanted the deed signed under the power of attorney. And I said, I'm sorry, in Rhode Island, the title standards are very clear that the expectation is that the seller has to sign the deed individually. They're not able to sign the deed under a power of attorney unless there's some extreme circumstances and unless it's been, reviewed and approved. This isn't the kind of thing that at the closing I'm expecting to get a copy of a deed or a deed signed under a power. I just can't accept it. And he ran up one side of me and back down the other, yelling at me when I tell you about how...
In person? Or
in person. He's sitting like pretty much right where you are, and I was sitting at the head of the table, and, I don't know where you learned to practice law. Your father should be ashamed. This is absolutely not acceptable. And I was just like stunned because this
what
is...
year was that?
This was probably about 10 years ago. So I was still a relatively young practitioner, but I had been practicing enough that I was holding my own in this room. And the agent just kept yelling his name, trying to get him to calm down because he was just so escalated to a place of, anger, I guess. And asked where my father was. So I said, well, he's not here at the time. He had another closing on the road. I said, but I'll be happy to get him or the title insurance underwriter on the phone, who's another attorney who's been practicing, longer than I have. So he said, yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I walked out of the room and I was like, I can't believe what just happened in there. I was so, I guess, disappointed and also shocked at the disrespect that another practitioner would have in front of a room full of clients. If you're going to have a disagreement with an attorney, which we've all had.
Go outside.
Right. Hey, could we talk in private for a minute? Or I'm not sure that I agree with that position. I'd really like to, consult separately. So eventually he did go into the waiting room, and I got the title company on the phone. And actually at the moment, Carmen arrived back to the office. He was in the parking lot, and I was like, you need to go talk to this guy. And he actually used to work with him. So they knew each other really, really well. And I think, he probably was like, who's this young kid? Opposed to who's this, competent attorney. And that's one thing that I felt like I definitely struggled with as a young female practitioner when I started, was whether or not I was going to command respect. And it wasn't something that I ever felt that I didn't command until that one and only time. And it didn't really shake me because I just felt like this guy doesn't have his facts straight. What I was telling him was absolutely the truth. It's absolutely what we did, by the way. The deed ended up being signed in Florida and overnighted up the next day because I wouldn't accept it under the power of attorney. Neither would the title company or Carmen, who'd been practicing, 30 years my senior, because it wasn't the right way to practice. And there was no need for it. Again, if there's a competency issue, if there was some other reason for it, we would have accepted it under the power, but there was no legitimate explanation. So that's the reason that we had to sort of insist on it. But I look now at young attorneys and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm the old lady in the room now, I feel like.
So tell me, what is it like being the daughter, coming in as the daughter, where people hating on you or saying, oh, you had it easy? Like, did it make you work harder? Like, what? Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I definitely started my practice expecting that people were just going to be nice to me because I was Carmen's daughter. But as you mentioned earlier, it's an abused profession. So I learned pretty quickly that wasn't going to get it done. I needed to be very competent. And I guess I'm a little bit of an overachiever anyway. So I did not want to rest on my laurels or his laurels that, I'm going to be a capable attorney on my own 2 feet. And I know that I really have grown this practice in a way that he's proud of and that we both enjoy. It wasn't just, oh, well, keep doing what, Carmen does. I looked outside the box to develop other areas. I can say that there were definitely occasions where people would say to me, wow, you're doing a great job. And I thought, again, oh, they're just being nice. But then I started going to other closings where I was experiencing other attorneys. And some of them weren't giving the same detailed explanations that I would give a client, or, the atmosphere was somewhat disorganized. And I started to recognize I do have certain qualities that you can't learn. You just either have or you don't have. And I think obviously I've been groomed for this position my entire life. My very first career day in kindergarten, my dad dressed me up as a lawyer and set me on my way. So whether you realize it or not, you are being groomed by an attorney to think like one, be able to, constantly preside in a way that is going to command respect, but also, you're listening. So I guess I'm very blessed and fortunate that I was able to take on those traits, and I started recognizing that I am a good attorney and good practitioner, and that people are going to respect me and listen to me, not because I'm Carmen's daughter, but because I've been able to elevate to that point.
Right.
I think initially they gave me the benefit of the doubt, which not everybody gets.
Yep.
But I think for the most part, kind of back to one of your questions earlier, if you're coming out as a solo practitioner, I think it is really important to work in a firm so that you can start to be able to learn some of those characteristics and those traits and, be in a position where people recognize you as a name brand, not just as, well, who's this fly-by-night person?
Right.
Because it's going to take longer and it's going to be harder to get that name recognition without it. So.
Is it hard to turn off when you go home? I don't turn off.
I don't
That's
turn
my
off.
biggest flaw is I can't stop.
Yeah.
I'm checking my phone, just like I emailed you last night.
Yep.
And you're back to me in minutes. And
Right.
it's like, I'm the same way.
Yeah.
Is that how you always are? Like you just always want to, like you said, type A. Get it now and not later.
Yep. I can say that, again, I think there's a certain breed of us out there, and it tends to have that entrepreneurial spirit where you are going to be that above and beyond all the time. I can't shut it off. I don't have another way of doing it. I just do it. And I mean, honestly, Greg, it's tongue in cheek, but another memorable moment, there was a particular transaction where I really was not a fan of the parties involved. They were mean, they were abusive to my staff, and I would never want to say that I was going to go above and beyond, but when the clients showed up and the rubber meets the road, I can't do it any different. I still went above and beyond. And, frankly, I said it was for the client. It wasn't for the parties that had gotten it to that point because they were downright mean-spirited. But it was for that individual client who really did genuinely appreciate all the additional effort. And I was rewarded with a thank you, a letter of recommendation from the agent that I've sort of turned into a believer, who started off saying like, I can't believe how difficult everything is, to, wow, you really do have a passion for this. And it is something that I think people see regardless of what you do. I mean, if you shine shoes, you're going to be a really good shoe shiner because you do it well, because you love it. It doesn't matter what kind of walk of life you're in. If that's who you are, it's going to show. I do genuinely believe that.
And how about hobbies? What do you do for fun?
Oh my God, there's no time for fun. Come on, man. I love to play golf. But I don't get out very often. I really, really love spending time with my husband and my two boys. And again, I don't get to do that as often as I would like. I had mentioned before, we're very, very tight-knit family, so spending time with family is certainly something we do. I'm a shopping enthusiast for sure. I love to shop.
Shoes, bags, anything?
Yeah, love to read. But it's primarily golf and family. There's not a whole lot more, and there's not a lot of time for more.
True.
So.
How about restaurants? I always ask folks, what's your favorite restaurant in Rhode Island?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Jesus, I don't know if I have a favorite restaurant, because it really kind of depends what you're hankering for. What do you want to eat?
Italian food.
Oh, I have to say, I'm a little bit spoiled with my Italian heritage, that I would have to go on the hill for good Italian, but I really prefer to make it myself.
Wow.
Back when I was pregnant with my first, it really got to a point where it was like, we have to go out to eat all the time, right? Because once you have that baby, you're not going out to eat without a babysitter, and it's a bigger undertaking. And I got to the point where my husband and I said, we really do prefer to cook for ourselves. We've got better atmosphere.
Yeah.
We have better meals. It's less expensive. You can control the environments. Unfortunately, now I go out to eat as a luxury, but I do feel like sometimes I am disappointed.
So what do you guys make? Are you making meatball? Are you making shrimp
Everything.
scampi? Are you
Everything.
making steaks?
Yeah. It depends on the night. We're big fans of, the Taco Tuesday, and my kids love it. Making pizza from scratch with the dough and rolling it out, and you've got to try to keep the kids' hands washed and away from the dough.
How old are your children?
3 and 6.
Okay, so
Yeah, they're
do
young.
they know about what you do here? Do they know about Grandpa?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. I've tried to get my oldest, the 3-year-old, he doesn't really understand anything. But the 6-year-old, I've taken him on occasion, like if I have keys for a client, if I drop them off to the client again, I go above and beyond. I can't do it any other way. He'll say, well, Mommy, why are we at this lady's house? And I'll say, don't you remember, what Mommy does for work? And he'll say, no. And I'm like, how do you not understand this yet? Because I spend so much of my life at work. But I don't know that they understand hard work. That's one characteristic I can say that was instilled from my predecessors and my successors. My grandparents really were hardworking Italian and always understood the importance of hard work. And they've, like I said, put it in me in a way that I can't change. Same with my father. And I know that I've done that for my boys. They play going to work. And when they're playing going to work, they're building houses. So maybe it's somewhat related that they're building, whether it's a garage or whatever it is they're building with their blocks and their magnets. But it's fun to watch. I hope that we're doing a good job, because generationally it's scary to raise humans.
What do you think about that? What do you think about children? I was born in 91.
Okay.
So I was coming up.
God, you're young.
Very young. Computers were just coming out.
Yeah.
I had a flip phone in 2002.
Yeah.
And our generation towed the line between we worked with our hands,
right,
but then we started to see technology.
Yeah.
What do you think about today's generation?
It's really hard to know what today's generation is going to experience, especially with the distance learning and the amount of engagement that we're seeing with technology. Did you end up having laptops in high school or iPads?
The gateway computer.
So you had the old-fashioned computers. Yeah. Okay. As did I when I was learning typing and computer science.
Word processor.
Aside from that, I was still old-fashioned taking notes, pen and ink. And I have a young lawyer, I have legal interns who they tell us that there is empirical evidence that you learn better by reading it the old-fashioned way, not on a computer. You learn better by taking old-fashioned notes, not typing it on a computer. I can tell you that I'm probably equally fast typing as I am writing. I feel like I can be a little more brainless with typing because you just do it almost as an automatic, where writing I'm a little more, conscientious of my letters and the way I'm writing, because I do think that's kind of a lost art that our kids, again, they're not going to really understand. But I don't know. I think that there is going to be a major shift, again, kind of getting to that technology. I think it will support the digital age where clients and consumers don't want to go to closings and sign their signatures. I think they'll want to do it digitally because I think that's what our next generation is seeing at this point. I'd like to think there may be a few that are bucking the trend because they were forced into it as a function of the distance learning, even on the college level as well as the primary school levels. But I just don't know if it's going to be enough of a movement to say they want that in-person, feeling of the pen and ink. It's hard to tell.
Now, what's your thoughts on distance learning? Have you experienced it at all? I'm
experiencing it now. My son is in kindergarten, and he's doing distance learning 3 days a week and in-person 2 days a week.
Okay.
And it's very, very difficult at that age level to engage. I think it's difficult at any young age level, even, certain high school levels may find it difficult, but I think that primary school level is really a challenge to keep them engaged and understand what's going on, because I think they need that interaction and that sort of regimented schedule. The junior high school levels, they've had training of what school looks like, what that academic career is supposed to be like, the rigid hours of being in school. My son is saying, well, I want to go outside and play. I don't want to do this. It's like, well, it's not an option to do it or not do it, but they don't get that connectivity because they've never had school. So, he's going to school for the first time this week in person, and he's been in preschool, but again, that's really short It's a couple of hours, so it's not the same as
Right.
going to all-day kindergarten.
So you're saying it's tainting their future perception of how it is, or we went through it.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely shifting the way that they're looking at school and maybe even the way they value school,
Right.
which I fear, honestly,
100%.
because when I was in school, I don't know what your kindergarten was, mine was only a half-day kindergarten, but once I got into first grade, that was it. You were there all day, every day. Like, this is when, you kind of make the boys from the men, as they say. You start to learn this is your job, right? Just like we're talking about, it's hard work. You have to work every day, and whether you work 12 hours or 8 hours, you're differentiating those boys from men. I don't know. I do certainly feel as though this is going to impact their interest in school, potentially.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm nervous about it, to be completely candid with you. So I know we're trying to go above and beyond to make them aware that this is really important. These are not options. You have to engage, even if it is behind a computer. You have to be engaged with your teacher. This is your job, just like mommy and daddy go to work. So we'll see what takes place.
My biggest question is the folks that work somewhere or single parents, how the heck do they, like, the toe of that line is impossible.
My heart really goes out for the single parents, because you don't have the ability, and I would never be able to do what I do as well as I do it without my husband.
Right.
I mean, we are absolute equal partners, 50-50. There's no hers, his, obligations. And I think that really is important. And I think that's one thing that, again, young children of two working parents see, that you have more of a family unit working towards achieving these goals versus mom's job is to stay at home, dad's job is to go to the office. It's not like that anymore. We're way past that 1950 model, I think. Relative to the distance learning, I'm fortunate that we do have somebody in the house to manage our kids and make that happen. I know that I have staff who are working from home, so they're sort of trying to do both. And even, realtors, lenders, people that I work with as colleagues that are, having the flexibility to work from home and also try to distance learn, they're telling us, like, it's not really working. They can't really focus on the distance learning, which requires so much involvement, and also do their job, which requires so much involvement. So it's almost like you end up having to pick and choose. This hour I'm doing this hour I'm doing this, and everything ends up suffering. So I know that there are more programs that are becoming available, even daycares that are offering, bring your kids here for distance learning so that we can try to manage it. Whether or not that mitigates the reduction and spread of COVID and germs and all of that, is another whole political and, whatever conversation that who knows. So.
And how about your husband? What does he do for work?
He's a financial advisor.
So can he work remotely?
He can work remotely, but it's not, again, successul, because for the most part, you need to be in person to develop and build those relationships. So during the beginning of COVID, he worked a lot remotely, and our nanny was there, so our kids kind of had double parenting during the day, which was nice.
Awesome.
Right now, he's working kind of banker's hours to maintain what his client relationships need to be, so they can still meet with him in person.
Interesting.
Yeah. But, everything's behind, like, sneeze guards and 6 feet apart. And, I mean, I haven't shaken anybody's hand since this interview in a long time. So
We just did.
I know.
You broke the seal.
That's it.
Pounded two times.
2 times touching. I've had clients extend their handshake, and I'll say, hey, COVID, we're not supposed to touch, or, something like that, just because I don't know, maybe they work for the state and they're just here to test me.
I don't work for the state.
I know you don't.
They fired me.
Oh, did you work for the state? Oh, okay.
Originally, I was going to be a state trooper.
No kidding.
I volunteered multiple years. I think like 2.5, 3 years.
Wow. What happened?
I have a tattoo.
Oh, that precludes you from being able to be a state trooper?
So every day I wore this type of attire.
Right.
I worked at Lincoln Woods Barracks. I worked at the headquarters. I worked in the evidence room. I did all these with different troopers.
Yeah.
And I would always have to dress up, shave. Like I had to look like
the part.
And then one day I was like maybe typing, and they noticed just the Z here. This is my family name.
Oh.
And they said, "What's that?" And I go, "Oh, it's my family name." And he goes, "You got to get that removed, bud." And I was like, "I can't. It's been done twice. It's double inked."
No kidding.
And I wouldn't take it off anyways.
Wow.
So he goes, "Sorry." you can't apply. You can't even.
I had no idea.
It's a newer thing.
Oh, okay.
2012.
So there was
11.
probably certain police officers who were grandfathered in, but now, wow, I wonder why that is.
Elbow below, neck up, nothing.
So you can have the ink, you just can't have it within eye shot. I see.
It's the appeal. They're clean cut. They're professional. They don't want you looking. They call it a soup sandwich.
A soup
sandwich, like you're just a guy with tattoos with a beard. Like you're not the image. You might be a local cop. You're not a state cop. That's their thing, and I agree with it. But it's just like I wouldn't.
If only it was a little higher. Oh no, you said elbow down. That wouldn't work.
But 3 years of my life there, so I have a passion for law enforcement. I still respect them. I still love them, but I chose a different path.
Yeah, that's funny because I could totally see you as any type of law enforcement because you definitely have that kind of look.
And I don't know why. My dad's a mason. My mom was a waitress.
No kidding.
My grandfather sold fireworks.
Oh my gosh.
So it's like, I don't know where that...
Anti-law enforcement there.
Exactly. So I don't know. It's weird. My family, I said maybe I'm the milkman son. I don't know.
Hope your dad doesn't hear that.
He'll laugh. He's got a good humor.
Good.
I love my dad, just like you love your dad.
Of course, yeah.
So what would you say to the folks at home, the women at home, that maybe want to start their own business?
Wow.
What advice maybe to entrepreneurial women?
So I would say do it, but you definitely need to have a plan. I am all for, fake it till you make it, but you still need to know what you're doing. You can only fake it till you make it for certain aspects. You need to have some competency. So if you're selling widgets, you better be the best widget maker, and you've got that process down to a science before you're able to go out there and pretend you're a business person, asking for money and, doing all the things that you need to do to kind of develop that capital, if you will. Obviously, I would suggest starting with people that you have the buy-in from, your family, your friends, your core of people who believe in what it is that you're going to be able to do. Because it is going to be a long and arduous journey.
So do it.
I say do it.
And have a plan.
Yeah.
What do you think is the new business to start? Like if you were...
These are hard questions, Greg.
This place burned down to the ground.
Oh my God.
What would you do? What would be your next thought? Like 2020, 2021, this is the new business to be in.
So as a lawyer, right, I feel like I have to just disclose, if it burned to the ground, I would just rebuild it. I would never just give up on it. I've worked way too hard to get to that point. But I don't know. Or if I won the lottery and I just decided I was going to shift gears. Yeah. Jesus, what would I do? I don't know. I think that there are certain points in my life where I was really into working out, and I've said I would have loved to have gotten more into personal training, that kind of thing, because that's where my passion was at the time. Not anymore. I did a lot of baking during COVID, so maybe I'd be a baker because I like to eat. So I think it really kind of depends, because it's one of those things that you sort of evolve as your life changes, right? I can't imagine turning my back on real estate altogether. I think that I would probably reinvent myself to do something within the confines of real estate, whether it would be as an agent or as a lender or somewhere in that capacity. I would say, though, if I had it all to do again, I would probably go into tax accounting. That would be the one thing that I feel like maybe I sort of missed my mark. With having the accounting background, my husband was studying for his CFP a few years back, which is Certified Financial Planner, and he was asking me a number of questions about some financial concepts and accounting concepts that he just couldn't grasp. And I was really it kind of sparked, and I was like, God, why didn't I get my LLM in tax and be a tax attorney? Because I feel like those guys really, again, you've got so many angles. You can be someone who is defending people who are involved in tax evasion. You can help people and work with the IRS to work out tax repayment programs. You could work for the IRS. There's a lot of different angles that you could take it. But it really does kind of take the two things that I have a favorite for, which is the law and the numbers, and bring them together. So that's the one piece. I guess if I had to do it all again and shift gears, but I just feel like there's way too much ahead of me to have to start that over. So it would have to be like a true burn it all to the ground. There's no way you can go back. And then what would you do? Get an LLM and go into tax law.
LLM is?
Oh my God. I'd have to look it up. It's basically a major in taxation. It's a even more standardized law degree.
Okay.
It's Latin, but I can't remember the letters. Another year, just one more year.
Oh, wow.
So I know, it's not that big a deal, but I still can't imagine doing it right now with a practice and a young family. Yeah. It's more than I would be willing to deal with.
Cool.
Or teaching. Teaching something else that I do have a passion for, and I do a lot of education work at a realtor level. I do a lot of CE training, so like the continuing education. So that is something that I do really enjoy doing. A lot of people tell me I do it well. I don't know. I like it. It's something that I have talked about doing on a college or undergraduate an undergraduate level or a graduate level teaching. It's just a matter of, again, finding the time to build those curriculums and what part of the law would I want to teach. Is it going to be business law? Would it be tax law? So when I mentioned tax law, that was kind of the second kind of, if I had to come up with a new career path, what would it be?
Interesting.
Yeah.
I volunteer, I teach at the ACI.
Oh, no kidding.
So
what do you
teach? Job readiness.
Oh.
Okay, so we get 25 offenders, they're called.
Okay.
And they come in and they're going to be released within 3 to 6 months.
Okay.
So the idea of the program is I teach them in concurrence with them being excited to leave. They're receptive to the information and they take it and effectively apply it.
That's interesting.
It's a great
It's a really
thing.
cool.
Total volunteer. It's a pilot program.
Oh, no kidding. How long has it been effective?
About a year or two.
Oh, wow.
So it's just me and another guy, Bill. We both run our own classes. And I started with 25. The last class ended with 6.
Oh, no.
Because I have to see them to the door if they're distracting the other classmates or they got their feet on the desk or they're just mouthing off. So a lot of
They're not job ready.
They're not job ready.
Wow. That's a really cool program.
It's great. And at the end of it, they get a booklet from me with every single employer in Rhode Island.
Oh, no kidding.
City and town, alphabetical, that'll hire somebody with various types of criminal records.
Which not every industry even has the ability to do that because of governmental regulations.
But I say, here you go. Here's like 300 companies that this is their threshold.
Wow.
So that's how I give back because I've always loved the teaching thing, but don't have enough time to be a teacher or a professor.
Well, it's sort of interesting with your interest in law enforcement too. It's almost a juxtaposition, actually.
True. It feeds a little bit of it.
Yeah, I can see that.
So it's interesting.
Wow, that's really cool. What else do you do?
I would say my biggest hobby is going to rock concerts.
Oh yeah?
Me and my dad.
No, that's
You've
cool.
probably seen Hello Dad. We bond together with that.
Nice.
Because it's music that he grew up with.
Okay.
That I listened to in his truck.
So are these cover band type?
Sometimes.
Okay.
But 80s rock, 90s rock bands.
Okay.
We gravitate, like hair metal bands. You probably remember the guys with the long hair.
Are those guys still touring?
Yes.
No.
$20 for a show.
What's the last one you saw?
It was in New Bedford. It was Enough's Enough.
Okay.
I don't even know if you...
I've definitely heard the name. I could not give you their song.
But they're
like, is it, were they a one-hit wonder?
Kind of.
Yeah. I know the name, but I can't pick out the song.
But it's all they know and it's all they love.
Yeah.
So we forget about them.
Right.
People are like, oh, 30 years ago, that band's dead. They're gone.
Right.
But they're still out there. So we
amazing.
admire the passion. We admire that they're still there performing for 200 people.
Yeah. That's cool.
So that's what I do.
That's fun.
So my last question.
Yes.
The folks at home.
Yes.
What should they know about you?
About me personally?
Yes. What should they take from this interview and say, that's Melissa?
Oh. I guess I'm hardworking. I'm honest. I'm transparent. I don't know how to do it any other way. I just don't. I will always go above and beyond to the extent that I can, probably to a fault. Saying no is not one of my strong suits. So if you are a client or an agent or a lender that I have to say no to, like a mom or a dad says, you have no idea how much harder it is for me than it is for you to do that, because it is something that I really do genuinely to my core struggle with. I mean, I can tell my kids know, my parents know, my husband know, but professionally, I don't know what my problem is. Saying no is just not in my vocabulary. I think it's because I've always been taught that, you know, again, that entrepreneurial spirit, you are only as good as your last client. You're constantly always trying to prove yourself. And that's really what I do. That I work as hard as I possibly can on every single transaction for every single client. I think our entire office staff is dedicated to doing just that because they recognize it from myself and my father. We just sort of breed it, you know, it's what we do. I can't have somebody that's not going to be in that cut from that same cloth answering the phones and fielding questions for clients because it all rolls back to me. You know, at the end of the day, my clients, a lot of them have my cell phone number, have my personal email, and they will reach out to me if there's something that they're not sure about or it just doesn't feel right. And I implore everybody to do just that.
Cool. That's my last thing is how do folks get in touch with you?
Yes. So probably the best way to reach us is searching us through our website, delanalaw.com. Has
apostrophe or no?
No apostrophe, just
straight
all
through.
lowercase, DELLENALAW.com. So that's the information. There's lots of good content information. There's links to our video content that's on our YouTube channel so that, you know, clients and consumers can get various bits of information throughout the process. Obviously, we're all on the phone every day and in closings every day, so it can be somewhat difficult to get me on the line. Email is probably the next best way to reach me because it's something that I can respond to at obscene hours of the day or night as I'm trying to work through, you know, the workload. Because I genuinely believe no one cares, you just work harder. That's what people want. They want someone who's going to work hard all the time. So that's what we do.
And you're on Emilio's radio show.
I am.
And I have a confession. Her videos are my favorite videos.
No, you're just saying that.
100%.
Why?
Because the content, and it's like, oh yeah, I always wonder what I do in that situation.
Oh.
Click. And then I get the 3-minute cliff notes from you.
Well, that's great.
So
I'm glad to hear
I
it.
align more to your videos, and I always click. I'm always watching the full thing.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
So hopefully folks watch the whole interview. This
Yes.
is a long,
It was.
I mean, almost an hour.
And not as much content rich as much as it is personally rich.
Yes, get to
because
know.
I don't do any of this. It's actually really uncomfortable. I'm fine being behind a video or on the phone with somebody doing an interview, but it's really uncomfortable for me to talk about myself unless somebody prompts me to do it.
Right.
So I appreciate that I had the opportunity because unless somebody asked me, I would be happy to give you, you know, lots and lots of recording information about non-resident sellers or, you know, title insurance or, you know, the legal piece, but to talk about me and how I got here and why I am or how I do it never occurs to me that people are interested in that, honestly.
They are.
I guess.
They are. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if you have any questions for me, throw it down in the comment sections below, and I'll get right back to you. Once again, Melissa Delana of Delana Law and Greg Rice of Nexus Property Management, your property managed.